Time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, starting with some good stuff, both you and Craig accurately predicted for months, even when things were not looking good for Joe Biden, that a deal would be worked out on infrastructure. And that bill passed yesterday. So congratulations to you both on that. As you know, 19 Republican senators voted for that bill, including Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. And I suspect some of our viewers are scratching their heads like I am as to why McConnell would allow Biden to have such a big win, given his track record in the past. And particularly when Donald Trump campaigned at the last minute to kill it. What are your thoughts on this? And what does it mean for Biden's $3.5 trillion budget proposal that's now under review?
Well, I guess my thoughts are that first, infrastructure is popular, as we've said. Republicans want something to vote for, to be able to tell voters they've supported. They don't want to just be the party of no, and McConnell understands that. And the truth is, Trump probably had no influence at all on any of the senators who voted for it. And 19 Republicans voted for it. 7 are up next year, but 3 are retiring. And Charlie Cook rates the other 4 as being absolutely safe. So there's not anything Trump was going to do. As to the $3.5 trillion budget, we've got a long way to go. Just so people who watch the SPY know, a budget resolution is sort of like your wish list on Amazon. It's not defined legislation. You know, they say we want to do all these things, and now it's up to the committees of Congress to do the legislation to implement it. What the vote at 4 a.m. yesterday morning was just to let the process begin that will allow an actual budget and reconciliation process to go forward. But really, the battle begins in both houses. The infrastructure bill still has to pass the House. AOC and her lefty buddies, excuse me, in the House have threatened to hold it hostage, the infrastructure bill hostage, until the bigger budget is passed. Josh Gottheimer and the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is bipartisan, basically said, but representing the moderate Democrats, said we've got to do the infrastructure bill first, and then we'll get to the budget. Both say that they're going to hold up the other if they don't get their way. We'll see. Nancy Pelosi is pretty good at these things, but she's going to have to navigate that just to begin. Then you get to the battle over substance, what's actually in the bill. And I suspect the bill will have to be cut back. I don't think we'll pass a $3.5 trillion budget. To me, the person to watch is Mark Warner, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. He's a fiscal moderate. He's not a flashpoint like Joe Manchin, and he has real influence in the body. And what Warner will accept probably is something that could get through. To me, there are 3 important considerations. One is inflation. A second is faith in government, and the third is taxes. Inflation was up again this month. Chairman Powell of the Fed thinks that it's temporary, but as Craig knows from 1980, and I know because I sat in the Carter White House in 1979 and 80 as an economic advisor, and we watch those numbers come in every month. And every month, the Council on Economic Advisors would say, this is going to break in 3 or 4, in 4 months. And the next month, they'd say it's going to break in 4 months. And it went on for 2 years. So inflation can be persistent. And if it is, that will have a big effect on how much money the Congress will put into the economy. The second is this faith in government issue. You know, people want to know they're really getting what they're buying. And one of the rules of the Clinton administration is we didn't do any new investments, but we also didn't do a lot of reinventing a government to try to make the government work better. And that was a really winning formula for us. Now, we saw with the eviction crisis last week that we had spent a lot of money, or we had appropriated a lot of money to deal with evictions, and we had spent very little of it because the government just didn't function very well. You have a bunch of stories like that, and it will also make it a lot harder to pass a big bill. And finally is the issue of taxes. That really doesn't need any explanation. Whenever you talk taxes, you're going to have a big fight because everybody, as Russell Long said, don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax the guy behind the tree. And so that's going to be, that will be a big battle as well. My prediction is that in the end, we will get the infrastructure bill. We'll get a much more modest budget, but it's probably going to take the rest of the year and maybe even to the beginning of next year.
Craig, first of all, what do you think about McConnell giving Biden a win? And then what are your kind of prospects or your projections for the future of this 3.5 trillion?
Well, you know, we've said on this program before that the infrastructure bill was a bill that was probably too big to fail. The budget bill may simply just be too big. But the infrastructure bill is something around which Biden could build a consensus, at least with these 19 Republicans. And I think for McConnell, maybe the sand shifted enough so that he didn't just want to say no to everything and wanted something to allow his members and prospective Senate candidates down the road to say they were for. And they'll see money flowing by the time we get to the 2022 elections on projects that are, you know, in real need. You know, if you'd said no and you'd had a bridge collapse or another building collapse or a road cave in, you know, this would be laid at the feet of the Republican leader and those seeking office, whether it's fair or not. And I think he just simply felt that it was time to get on board so that you could show something was being done. I also think, and we've said this before, that the majority of the American voters want to see Congress get things done. And this is a place where you could come and do that. I thought there were a couple of interesting moments. One was certainly President Biden pledging not to put projects or funding back in through a reconciliation process that had been taken out by the negotiators. The fact that that was needed to get the Republican votes and maybe some Democratic votes, and they took his word, is a sea change from where Congress was with the former president. I think this bodes well for Biden in that he is a president who can be trusted, and assuming he keeps his word, and I assume he will, that will serve him well going forward. Going forward, the budget resolution is too big. It's also a different kind of legislation in the sense that if infrastructure was for paying for projects across the nation that people can see and appreciate, the budget bill is really a form of wealth redistribution. That's not to say that's a terrible thing. It's just that you have high net worth people and large taxpayers sharing vast sums of money, literally, you know, billions and billions of dollars, to put into programs that don't necessarily deliver the goods, like, you know, repairing a bridge or building a new highway or whatever it would do. And so I suspect that it's much less tangible. Thus, it's much less easy to build a consensus around selling it back home. So I think there'll be a budget resolution, I'm sure, but I think it will be scaled back, and it will probably not see some of the Republican support, because some of the Republicans will, or most of the Republicans will want to run against this high tax, massive spending package. even on the other hand, some of them would like to see it pass to flow some money into their states or their congressional districts.
Yeah, Craig, staying with you, it also should be noted that Fromm and Fuller correctly predicted last week that Governor Andrew Cuomo would step down. He did resign, but not with the kind of significant mea culpa that many were expecting when he made his decision yesterday. Is this really the end of Governor Cuomo, or will he rise
Well,
again?
it's not the end of the individual, and the individual has talents. It's always remarkable to see people who go through extraordinary turmoil, come out of the process and find something meaningful to do. I don't think in his case that's going to mean elected office. And I do think there's a number of issues he's going to have to work through before he gets there. President George Herbert Walker Bush had a phrase in a way for times like this, where he said, you can stick your finger in the air to see which way the wind's blowing, but if you're in the middle of a tornado, it doesn't necessarily mean much. And I think right now we're in the middle of a storm, or Cuomo is, and just where he comes out of this remains to be told. It's a unfortunate and sad story where there are a number of victims, I suspect more than we even know. And these are real personal traumas for people. And I think that, Al and I would have had to suffer from amnesia not to get this one right, because anybody that has, the problems he has and literally no support. I think the one thing that surprised me was how fast Democrats stepped away from him. But I think that's part of the sign of the times. I think that he must look around and go, my gosh, Clinton survived, Trump survived, people have survived these kinds of issues, but times have changed, and the conduct, and some of it fairly recent, was not acceptable, and people left him pretty fast. But again, I think he's an individual with talents, and we'll see what happens down the road in a few years.
Al, you have the last word. The other thing that came up, I guess, yesterday was that President Biden thought Cuomo had done a hell of a job, which is kind of a surprising statement right after kind of such a dramatic resignation. So what's your take?
I don't think Andrew Cuomo is going to rise again. I agree with President Biden. I think he's been a good governor. He's a smart guy, as Craig says, very talented, but he has no future in public office. The main thing that kills or that will block him is he has no support in his own party. He spent a lifetime. One of the reasons he's been a good governor is because he knows how to say no, and he knows how to push things through, and he knows how to get, he's in a sense, a no BS governor. And so along the way, he's made a lot of enemies, but as long as he's riding high, those enemies are going to be, ducking for cover. Now he's vulnerable as could be, and so they're coming out from under the cover. And what at least I said last week, and I think Craig concurred, was that he would probably not resign until it was clear that the impeachment was going to go ahead and that there were going to be votes for it. Well, that happened really quickly, and so in public life, I don't think he's going to have a role. But as I mentioned last week, I first met him when he was an advocate for the homeless and for street people in the 1980s. Yeah, I believe he's the kind of person, and despite all his flaws, who does want to do good things. And I think he'll pick a cause, maybe after a 2 or 3 year pause, or maybe even not that long, and get to work and maybe start a nonprofit. He'll still be able to raise money and probably wind up doing good, but it's not going to be in public office.
That's all the time we have. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thanks so much indeed. We'll see you next week.